Unashamed and Afraid, a show unashamed about sexual addiction recovery and unafraid of coming unto Christ for healing, where we share real recovery stories, learn from experts, and share resources that actually work. So join us in being unashamed and unafraid.
Hello, James.
How you doing, Steve?
We're here with friends.
Oh, our great
Is that
friend.
what this is?
You're already laughing?
Didn't
So-
take long.
I'm so nervous.
Episode number
40.
40. Miss Beckie, actual legal name Rebecca, but
True.
Beckie Hennessy,
Yes.
LCSW.
Yep.
AppSats certified.
Oh, that's adorable. Not yet.
Not yet.
There's paperwork you have to turn in.
In process
It's
of
hard. Yeah. I'm a candidate.
therapist of 17 years. 18?
Yeah, going on 18. Yep.
Going
I'm in
on-
my 18th year.
Going on 18.
Yeah.
Back again on the show. What am I missing in your resume?
Nothing. That's awesome.
Got it. You painted
Nailed
her into
it.
context.
So,
So
as we
good.
picked up from our friend, mutual friend Magic Mark, shout
Yeah.
out to Magic Mark, that is what you do.
Correct.
Who are you?
I am a daughter of God. I am a disciple of Jesus Christ. Period.
Are you someone who would identify as someone in sexual addiction?
No, but if I was, I wouldn't identify as that. That's not my identity. That's something I do.
Mm-hmm. James is catching me there.
See, that's why
You should
Becky's
become a
on the show.
therapist.
Yeah.
Oh, wait.
Good idea. That's it. I'll scrap my profession.
Do
and
you
become
identify as someone who has experienced betrayal trauma?
that. Yeah, I have been betrayed quite a bit.
So we had Intersection, episode 40,
We did.
4 years ago. It was September 2020.
Wow.
And I remember having a conversation with a Beckie Hennessy. You're wincing because you're not sure what the conversation was?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
We've had a lot of conversations.
we've had a lot of conversations.
How many
That
of
could
those
go a
do I
lot of
want to have
places.
me on a podcast?
Right.
Probably zero.
But I remember we had a conversation about you saying, hey, Stephen, you are very public with your story. And I, as a professional therapist, am getting more into the space of wanting to help people and women who have experienced betrayal trauma,
Sure.
right, from sexually compulsive behaviors. And, but I have my own story with that. And so how do I
Accurate.
navigate having my story? Do I share my story? And to where I am today, you know, like wanting to do this stuff professionally, like how do I kind of navigate all of that? And I think I was very much myself in that conversation. I'm like, be unashamed and just rolling on all of it. Yeah. But inviting you back on the show, we can do the basics of what betrayal trauma is and isn't. And we can do that in 5 minutes, I think. And put
I
that
think
in
we
there.
did that in episode 40.
We did. So
Yeah.
I'd say go back to episode 40 and get the
For sure.
basics. But we can, you know, pin down some quick definitions here in the first couple minutes of the episode. But what I'm interested in is we have a lot of people come on the show one time who share their story, who share their experience, who come on as experts. And then time goes by, things shift and change. And so I'm interested as you have been in your own journey, which you and I on a personal level are close and friends.
Sure.
And so have over those 4 years, you and I've got a lot closer in our friendship and connection. And James as well, right? And as we're all hanging out. And
For those of you who aren't watching, I am part of a Steve James sandwich right now.
yes, part of the Steve James sandwich. Just to know, like, what has shifted in how you help people heal betrayal trauma as a professional, what you have learned from your bones and own experience that you bring into the professional space. As you know, on Unashamed and Unafraid, we love speaking from the eye.
Sure.
Right. And so just to set that table, am I missing anything, Mr. James?
Oh, it's great.
What have I learned professionally since then, and what have I learned personally since then? Am I hearing that accurately?
Yeah, because your personal life is affecting your professional life,
For sure.
how you choose to help and guide people.
For sure.
Sure. So, James, but start us off, Betrayal Trauma 101. Give us a 5-minute, for those who haven't been in this intersection in the library,
Why are you asking me? Ask the professional.
No, you are. Go ahead.
No, we're gonna have you give us the 5 minutes, and then Becky's
And
gonna fill in the gaps.
Then
and give
Becky's
the
going to
deep
be like,
dive.
"Oh, you forgot about this
Exactly.
and this and
yes.
this and
Name
this and
everything that you missed. Yeah, we're really gonna undress you.
I'm just
Oh,
gonna
thank you.
give you a high five, actually.
Okay. So if
Brace
I
yourself.
okay. So betrayal trauma, or sometimes called relational trauma, is where somebody experiences a betrayal of the trust that existed between those two people that causes the person that receives that a significant amount of the trauma creates almost a shift in that person's sense of reality and what is true about their world. It's almost as though there's I think this movie Spanglish, he's like, my universe just cracked. Something along those lines. And I'm like, that's how I like to kind of relate that to, because when I feel like I can talk more about the symptoms of betrayal trauma than like defining like what it is exactly. The person will experience a questioning of their often almost every reality that they thought was true as they begin to question, like, can I even trust myself and my capacity to even read that other person or to read anybody else, anybody in my life, because I was so sure this was our relationship. And now all of a sudden it is completely not that. And that trust, that, that crack in the universe, that does not easily just get mended on over. So I guess that's overall kind of how I would talk about betrayal trauma, is it has a deep effect because it often affects that person's sense of like their capacity to know truth.
Yeah.
Fill in the gaps for us, Miss Becky.
So as I've tried to explore the whole betrayal thing coming from more of a personal space, like I thought for a long time, I thought I knew betrayal. I thought I understood betrayal. That's what I specialize in, and have experienced betrayal since a very young age. I've been betrayed by lots of different folks, and even had experienced it within relationship and all those kinds of things. So I thought I knew. And then I was hit with a semi-truck in 2019 and found out about some significant betrayal that had been occurring in my life, and went on my own journey to discover what betrayal trauma was for me, right? So like as a professional, I felt like I had a good handle on, if I'm sitting here across from you, I'm telling you what betrayal trauma is. And then as I'm experiencing it, I'm like, holy cow, there's a lot that I left out
So
as a professional.
give us that experience definition of betrayal trauma.
It's like, I think this is how I compared it on the other podcast, but it kind of feels like a house is burning down, and like you're driving through the neighborhood and you're like, oh, there's smoke. Hang on a second. Wait, what? And as you get closer and closer, you're like, wait a second, that's my neighborhood. And your heart starts to race, and you get closer and closer and you're like, oh my gosh, that's my street actually. And your heart starts to race a little bit more. And then as you pull up, you're like, that's my house, right? And there's no saving it. Like there's no way to save it. And so for me, it just felt like just standing there watching this thing burn down that I had built, right? Knowing that my kids are in that house, knowing that every memory, every part of my identity, every part of everything I knew is in that house. And now it's just complete ashes. Like that's the best way that I could say my own experience was, and the best way that I could say that I would compare that. And so you're just standing there, right? Like in ashes. And for me, given that I am a professional in this space, and by the time that I was hit with that semi-truck or my house burned down to ashes, I'd been in this game for a long, long time. And so for me, it rocked my world in a lot of ways. Like I felt like a fraud. How can I help people when my own house is burning down? All of the things that I had heard people say over and over, like, how come I didn't see it, and all the things. And I had all the right things to say to them about how come.
Being an expert who knows.
Yep.
Yeah.
I experienced that as well, right? And so I like words. I like definitions. I like things that are clear cut. And so as I started to explore what betrayal really was, my favorite reference is through the Gottmans, who, if y'all don't know the Gottmans, Google it and you will learn who the Gottmans are.
one of the proponents, one of the largest ways to do couples therapy.
For sure.
It's them and EFT. If you go see a couples therapist, you have a 90% they're either trained in Gottman or EFT.
Yep, absolutely. So Dr. John Gottman talks about betrayal, and the way that he words it is when you're in coupleship, there's this idea to turn towards one another, right? And so when one of the parties turns away from, that creates mistrust. When somebody turns away from and then towards someone or something else, that's betrayal. And so for me, I was like, that is exactly what you're talking about, because it was more than just somebody turning away from. It was somebody turning away from and towards something else or someone else. And so that definition, I'm like, yes, that absolutely fits my house burning down and me standing in ashes.
So connect with me, because and we talk about stuff like this a lot on the show, that we have a spectrum of people.
Mm-hmm.
So you've heard the story, as have I, of the woman who's like, whatever, this is a fair 16 and 3 at the same time. This just isn't that big of a deal.
16 and 3, what are you saying?
Oh, friend.
Oh, okay.
Like, this is big.
Got it. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
To this someone who's like, he looked at softcore porn once 5 years before we got married. Like, I'm betrayed, right? So I'm using extremes. I'm not minimizing anyone's experience. My point being is, how do I right size my experience for me? Because we talk about you don't trauma compare. So James and you can't say to me, well, hey, we had alcoholic dads. So sure, Steve, maybe your dad was emotionally available, but our trauma's worse than yours. We would never do that in trauma land, right? We don't compare traumas and say, well, mine's bigger, yours is smaller, whatever. So how does someone in betrayal trauma right size their disoriented experience? Like, how did you size your experience? Because that turning away from can be confusing, right? It's like, I've talked to people, they're like, well, he cheated on me because he looked at porn. And someone's like, well, looking at porn isn't cheating. Like, sure, it's bad, but it's not cheating. And people comparing and trying to size it. So how do you navigate that?
Yeah, I guess
as a
to
betrayed
me,
person?
all that's nonsense. Like, because at the end of the day, what betrayal feels like for me depends on so many different variables. My life experience, what I've dealt with in the past, or whatever. So for me, if I am saying I feel betrayed because of X, Y, and Z, feeling betrayed, that's just, we don't get to deny the feeling of like, I'm feeling betrayed. Right. And so I don't feel like there is an ability to like right size or wrong size it.
Well, and so how do I navigate that?
Navigate what?
The feeling of being betrayed. Because depending, for devil's advocate's sake,
Great, play it.
I'm like, James betrayed me because we were supposed to meet for lunch, but instead he went to lunch with Eric over here.
But your language is different. James betrayed me is talking about James's behavior. I feel betrayed is talking about my feelings. So if I keep it in the I and I say, I feel betrayed, you sure as hell better believe me, because I do. And that's just that. If I am speculating or accusing or assuming that you betrayed me, we're in a completely different camp and we're talking about something completely different.
Golden nugget number 1. James, tell me why you're smiling.
I'm not giving you enough love. I need to look at you too.
Oh, no,
Hi, James.
no.
It's me, Becky.
It's
Remember
all
me
good.
from the Accepted Offer?
Yeah, I just like to throw things in every now and then. That's okay.
Yeah. Stop.
Well, I like what you're saying, because it shifts things from the person that's feeling a sense of betrayal
Yes.
to all of a sudden, because that feeling's there, they shift that to an outward blame place. If, to use Steve's situation, well, James betrayed me because.
Yeah.
Rather than him being able to be like, look, I'm feeling a sense of betrayal from this, and this is feeling like this. That gives room for the one is feeling betrayed to explore actually their own emotion, rather than just all of a sudden defer all of that and push it out now to that, in this scenario for Steve to push it all out to me.
Yeah. And yeah, that it brings up two different things.
Right.
One, it brings up to me like a lot of compassion, because naming stuff is super important.
Yeah.
Right. And when you're in a betrayed space and you're like, I got to have a name for some stuff.
Well, and naming what actually is.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
naming the thing.
Yeah. Right.
Yes.
But there's a difference between the facts and speculation and
Yeah.
assumption. Right. So naming things is really important. I get why you would want to say you betrayed me, because you're just trying to like give it a label. You don't know what to call it. Like, you're just trying to give a label. Right. So I can give some compassion in that space. I think the other thing that's beautiful is if I say I'm feeling betrayed, then I am not like self-betraying by denying that feeling, right? And if I'm saying I'm feeling betrayed, I have a lot of power. I have a lot of power.
Correct.
Now,
and that's where I was going with.
Yes.
I'm no longer shifting the blame out here, where I'm abdicating power, in my opinion. When you move to blame, you're abdicating your power.
Yes. And again, I think naming and blaming is different.
Yes, I agree.
Well, and one reason why I think this is important is if I am in partnership with someone who is gaslighting and lying to me, trying to follow that outward experience is to me where the minefield of crazy making and so much of the damaging from the gaslighting and the lying and the deceit happens.
Yeah.
Because if I'm like, no, James, you betrayed me and we were supposed to go to lunch, but then you were with Eric. And he's like, I wasn't with Eric. I don't know what you're talking about. That was Tuesday. We were Thursday. No, I remember us talking. It was Tuesday. No, it was Thursday, dude. And you forget stuff all the time. Remember how forgetful you are? It's a problem all the time in our friendship. Da, 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 da.
Yes.
If I'm keeping this outward experience, my feeling of being betrayed, what I'm actually experiencing isn't ever getting addressed. And if I do that long enough, there's a lot of confusion that comes in, particularly if I'm in relationship with someone who is not only fine with me being confused, but is actively attempting to confuse me, make me smaller, so that they can turn the tables on me and be like, you crazy, or you drama.
That is very possible to happen even if all you do is name, I feel betrayed, because somebody in that camp that's trying to gaslight or talk about you being drama or whatever is going to be like, that's a you thing then. Figure that out. You feel betrayed. That's not on me. That's a you thing, right? So it is a very vulnerable thing to say, hey, I'm feeling this. But at the end of the day, feelings just are.
Well, and tell me if you think that's a good way to start to litmus test trust with my partner and where we're at. Because if you're saying I'm feeling betrayed and I go where you went and I'm like, whatever, that's your own, you deal with it. That kind of signals how safe I am, right?
For sure. And I think it's informational, right? Like, which is one of my phrases. Oh, that's informational.
That's one of your t-shirts.
It's one of my t-shirts, right? Like, I think that's informational because if I say I feel betrayed, and even if let's say my partner is like, I don't even know why, like I didn't do anything wrong or whatever. If I am saying as their partner and they care about me and they love me and I'm saying, hey, I feel betrayed, they're gonna be like, whoa, pause. Let's get curious about that. Like, let's unpack that a little bit. Let's figure that out. Let's at the very least, give you some empathy about feeling betrayed.
Empathy, and then do I owe you repair?
For sure. And so I think that it is a good litmus test. I also think that it's an opportunity for the person who feels betrayed to get curious about how come, right? Because I know for myself, there was a ton of betrayal before even getting into a marital relationship. And so I had to make sure that I was filtering out and looking through the correct goggles of why it was that I was feeling betrayed. Was I feeling betrayed because of something that happened to me clear back when I was 14? Because if I'm feeling betrayed because of that and it's showing up here, but it's really not theirs, I need to do something about that as well. So not only is it a litmus test for the partner outside, but it's also a litmus test for yourself of like, where's that coming from? And an opportunity to get curious about that.
Yes, and I think this is the key of starting to restore that compass and the crack in your universe, to use your analogy, James, of starting to manage my own feelings, care for them, validate them, and not wait for the partner to validate it.
Yes, and if I feel betrayed, I'm probably not feeling safe, and so I need to get my need of safety met.
Yeah.
But that's all my job. I mean, we talk about this all the time, right? Like, it's our job to get our needs met, ultimately.
Right. So I wanted to just talk about this when I'm going out there to try to get my safety, or I just kind of talk about some things that we've recently talked about, Steve, about often the betrayed partner will hang on so dearly to just wanting their partner to be accountable and to be sorry and to be like, I just want you to be accountable for it.
Just
and,
own it.
And just own that this is what you did, right? And unfortunately, sometimes there are partners that just will not do that.
What he meant to say is unfortunately a lot of times. That's what he meant to say.
And what I want to hear from you is, in your opinion, professional Becky, what value is there and what value isn't there in my partner being accountable? Because I think that gets real misunderstood. So I've betrayed Kayla for sure, facts. So me being accountable for that, what is it going to get her and what isn't it going to get her?
I think it depends on the individual, right? What I need to check in on myself about with that, so speaking from the I, right, is what's my objective? What am I hoping to achieve by them being accountable? Because if I'm hoping that I can regulate myself and I'm hoping that my emotions then will be fine and I'm hoping then I will absolutely feel safe. If they're accountable, I'm giving them a lot of power, right? So you all have talked about codependency a million trillion times. Like, is my desire for them to be accountable coming from any kind of a codependent space or coming from any kind of like a, then I'll be okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because if that's the case, that's a slippery slope.
Right.
Well, and I want to ask you, even if that person is accountable, does the goal get achieved? If that's the motive.
If that's the motive, no.
Even when the person's accountable.
Correct. Right? Because they're going to be like, how would I word this? Their accountability isn't going to give me what I think it is in that space.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I need some accountability so that I can litmus test whether or not they truly are going to make changes or that they're truly sorry or whatever, and I trust my own intuition and my own body, and as they're accountable, it tracks, and I'm putting it through who I call God, right? And I'm saying, are they really holding themselves, like, for
Yes.
sure,
Yeah.
that can be helpful.
Yes.
If I want to remain in relationship with this individual, or if I'm going to even remain in a co-parenting relationship with this individual, absolutely, I think that there could be some repair and that could be helpful.
Well, and for the relationship's sake, I would say
For
not
sure.
just help, I'd say necessary.
Absolutely required.
Yes.
Like absolutely required, right? But I have to be really clear on why I feel like it's important for them to be accountable. Because that can get really sticky really fast. Right? And if it's like a one up, one down situation, or see, so I told you so, or now I can have this to weaponize against you or whatever, that's super tricky. But what I've come to find over and over and over in a professional space is there is a vibe when radical accountability, radical ownership happens, radical honesty about what it is that they did. That feeling of that transparency, that honesty, that willingness to say, look, I'm going to own all my stuff that I did. That is really what's being looked for.
Well, yeah, and speaking from the eye on the person acting outside, right? That's how I take my power back.
Yes.
Is picking up my accountability and taking my power back. The same thing you're talking about, the betrayed partner, when I'm like, oh no, I'm going to own my stuff. I'm going to claim what's mine. I'm going to be stepping in to make repair. That radicalness, that's actually how I take my power back, and I don't codependently give it to you. Well, I don't know, are you mad at me? Are you not mad at me? Are you willing to stay in a relationship? You know, all of the, kind of puppy dogging codependency questions. When I take my power back and I'm like, I'm willing to own what's mine and clean up what's mine and really get there.
Yeah.
Which I'm with you. There's a vibe to that.
There's a vibe to that. And like, that's why disclosure can be so awesome. That's why therapeutic disclosure can be so awesome. Is it's not just so that he can get his whippings and be in trouble and feel the deepness of his shame that he should be feeling. And again, I know women and men both betray him, all the I'm just using.
Yeah. We're genderizing it right now. We totally know there are women who have affairs, women who act out, men who don't.
But
abuse can happen in both
ways.
ways.
But if I'm wanting that because I'm like, I want your pound of flesh.
Yeah.
That's why I want you to do disclosure. That's not a reason to just to do that disclosure. Disclosure for me as the betrayed happens so that I can make the most informed, educated decision as to whether or not I want to consensually stay in this relationship and in this partnership.
Yes.
Because up to that point, I did not get to consent.
Yes.
I didn't know what was going on, and we got married or whatever, and I didn't have consent. I didn't know what I was signing up for. You did, but I didn't.
Well, yeah, I
Right?
mean, that's mine and Kayla's
Yeah.
story
And
for
so
sure.
that
She
absolutely
didn't get
gives,
to make a choice.
yeah, that gives me an opportunity to say, okay, I know, now that I know all the things, all the chips are on the table, am I going to make the informed decision to stay within this relationship? It's the first time that I
Yeah.
really get to have consent, right? And for the guy or for the other person,
Yeah, the
it
acting
gives-
out partner or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah, it gives them an opportunity to shake out the shame
Yep.
and to take that power back.
Do you think also it gives, so I'll just name one of the things that I think has been a hard part in my recovery is the times when I'm like, I really want to make repair. And Kayla's been like, I don't know what that is. Do you think disclosure helps also a betrayed right partner be able to also formulate what I need in repair and what repair would look like? Like now that I have the accountability and now that I have the story, do you think that helps aid in being able to name repair? Because I think it's really hard for betrayed partners to name repair. That's my real question I'm trying to get at. How do you figure out how to name repair? Because the initial of, well, just stop your behavior, never do it again, and become super ultimately safe. I'm like, okay, sure. Yes. Now,
Yeah.
has that actually happened between two humans?
I'm going to disagree. Can we still be friends? I'm going to
No,
disagree.
but give me.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree because I think betrayed partners, I think humans know what repair feels like. I think from a very young age, we know what repair
For
feels like.
some of us who may be struggling, help us understand that.
Struggling with what? My words?
No, knowing what repair is. I'm saying
knowing what
flesh
repair
that out
is
for
or
us.
knowing what repair feels like.
Yes, and.
Because,
Take us on a repair tour.
well, I mean, there's a YouTube video that's way better than what I'm going to tell you. Look up Dr. Kennedy repair on YouTube.
Boom,
She explains it
resource.
really,
Let's
really
hit
well.
it.
Great. We'll do that.
But like from a very young age, I know this because I have kids that I make repair with, right? And like my 4-year-old on their face, I know that I've repaired because, and they know what that feels like. So I think they know what that feels like. What it sounds like may be a little bit tricky. And I think the only way to do it, and this is tricky, but I'm using the word only liberally. I get it. But I think the only way to do it is trial and error.
Yeah.
Is to like, okay, try this on and this is how I'm going to word it. And we're workshopping this. And actually that came out sideways and that doesn't feel like repair at all. That actually feels like gaslighting. And this is what and as that happens, you're going to tease out what repair, because again, what repair feels like for me and what I need in repair is going to be different than you because we have completely different life experiences.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on then? Is there a way to do healthy accountability and unhealthy accountability?
Give me some examples. What would that even sound like?
I don't know.
Well,
That's why I'm asking you.
Yeah, I think maybe this is what you're going to is like with relapses, and it's rare that anyone's recovery, a beautiful therapeutic disclosure happens, and then there's no ongoing disclosure. There's no additional relapse. There's no. Is that what you're trying to get at?
Yeah. Just is there a way to if we get to?
I guess to me, I feel like you can't put unhealthy and accountability in the same sentence.
Okay.
Because is accountability unhealthy? It's not.
Right.
So healthy accountability is healthy accountability.
Yep.
And then I don't know. I mean, the unhealthy would be not accountable.
Great.
It would be justification or gaslighting or something else. But I don't know that, like, if you're truly being accountable, those words to me don't.
There's no way to
match
be
up.
unhealthily accountable.
Not
How can I? Well, maybe to keep barking up this tree. How can a betrayed partner show up to create more safety or be a landing place for accountability? Like, how can I garner my side of the street?
Well, let me
right?
can I pause
You
that
got to
one?
reword that.
Let me
That came out
finish.
sideways.
Let me finish. Ask now that we've gone down your track. Let's go back to mine. Of if you're experiencing a partner who just simply refuses to be accountable, take ownership.
Straight up.
Yeah,
Can I curse?
Not the F-bomb.
Thank you for clarifying. That's not my shit.
But what do you do? You're
Yeah,
married to someone
okay.
who's having that
So,
experience.
But
Yeah.
that's super painful. You want the person to be accountable. And it's really painful that, in a sense, that person will never own their problem. They won't even maybe see it. They won't even acknowledge. And, like, that's painful, right? To have that sense of injustice walking with you.
Yes. What are you asking?
How can someone who is experiencing
that.
a partner like that
A
How can
partner
they
who doesn't really want to
sure
own what they're
yeah
doing.
that just won't be accountable.
Got it.
How
Got it.
can that betrayed spouse move forward
Got it.
and
Okay.
like move and just reconcile that, move forward with that, and still find peace and health and goodness without just eating at them? Because
Yes.
we as human beings desire justice. We desire to just, you know what I mean?
For sure. Okay.
Yeah.
I think yes. I'm going to clean up the street for just a second. As a betrayed partner, it is not your job to create safety for your partner necessarily to come and talk to you about whether or not they relapsed or not. Just like
Agreed.
it's not their job to hold your safety as well. So I'm just cleaning
Agreed.
up that side of the
Yeah.
street. I think what was really surprising to me in a personal space was actually how much recovery I could do regardless of what my partner did. I had preached that. I had said that that's totally possible,
Mm-hmm.
but hadn't necessarily experienced it.
And then, so in your experience, walk, and maybe, in your experience, the person was accountable. Maybe they weren't. But how, in that scenario, I'm sure you've had clients where the spouses just flat out won't be. How does a betrayed person move forward when they know they will never get that justice? They will never get that apology. They will never get that
Accountability.
repair. They will never get that accountability.
Yeah. I think there's a couple things that go into that, right? Like, one thing is I need to be super clear on what it is that I need, not necessarily from someone else,
Mhm.
but what is it that I need,
Mhm.
and then make sure that need gets met in
Okay.
a productive way, right? I know, I'll just speak from the I for myself, when the apologies never came,
Mhm.
that I didn't just need them, I deserved them.
Correct.
I deserved
For
them.
sure.
Correct.
The apologies never came. The ownership never came. In many different ways that I was betrayed, and
Right.
still to this day has not.
Correct. And
Right.
so how do you move through
I'm
that?
getting there.
Yeah.
So as that happened for me, what I had to do is I had to go to the one who not only felt what I felt, but the one who felt what they felt,
Mhm.
and that is Jesus Christ. And I had to go and say, hey, you're standing in their place. You hurt me. You need to fix it. You need to apologize. And then receiving that sincere, empathetic apology from Jesus Christ, standing in their place and saying, totally. I totally screwed you over. I totally betrayed you. I absolutely did X, Y, and Z. And me being able to receive that from him, knowing how the atonement works. And that, yes, Jesus walked the path with me, but Jesus also walked the path with them as they were acting out. And he did those actions with them as that was happening. That's part of the atonement.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's been the only way so far that has worked for me to be able to feel like an apology has happened through him.
Well, I guess I want to make sure I'm understanding, so I'm saying it a different way, is God's able to fill that gap and really speak from a place of knowing. Because like when someone else is like, oh, I'm sure that sucked for you. Like they don't have the knowing,
I
right?
would say God is coming from a place of experiencing. It's more than like God experienced that.
As he took upon us his sins in the Garden of
Yeah,
Gethsemane.
has
Correct.
the knowing.
Correct.
Yeah, I don't think God went and sat down and watched a bunch of porn and had an affair,
Correct.
but he has the knowing
Yes.
of the experience.
Yes.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
Got it.
cleaning up, to use Becky's word, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
Got it.
so he can sit in that knowing.
Yes.
Right. And to your point, not just because he's like, I'm sure that's sad for you. He's like, I see the full picture. I experience the full picture. I experience all sides of the table.
Yeah.
So can connect those dots where the actual person may not be able to.
Correct.
Or is it willing to?
And I think that
Or is
there's
it-
also,
yeah.
I mean, we would all speak to this. I think there's also therapeutic experiences that you can have where you can quite literally experience the other person saying all the things that you needed them to say, doing all the things that you needed them to do. I mean,
bending time and space
yes,
and doing the
preaching
trauma
about
work.
Yes. Yep.
experiential work, like that is in addition to that.
Yep.
But for me, the deepest parts of like, but who's going to own this? Because my life is wrecked and ruined. And who's going to own that? And just recognizing that for now, Jesus got to hold that space, and God is a master of compensation at some juncture. Whatever needs to happen has or will, right? But allowing that to be what it needs to be for now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite things is to bait Becky, because you're as passionate as I am. So I'm like, what about this? And you're like, no, man, that's not the thing, right? So I think baiting you a little bit, but I think this is one of the crosses that like I have a lot of curiosity about. I think everyone in relationships do, but I think we can put it in the lens of betrayal trauma. How do I navigate between all the therapy word things? You're accountable for you. I'm accountable for me. My side of the street, your side of the street. I create my own safety. You create your own safety. All of the things, right? And then how do we also create space for, I 100% influence my partner. I have influence, not over in a controlling puppet string way. I 100% influence James's life and your life, and have influence and have connection in you in relationship in which I can influence your life for better or worse. And so how do I navigate between, hey, I want to try and make this relationship work. I want to do healing, repair, restoration. So how do I influence for good, but not get caught in all of these snares of codependency and control and rescuing and all of the stuff? How do I, because, by definition, like, it's very disorienting. And so how do I navigate, or what does it feel like to know the difference between this is me in a healthy way, trying to have light and influence my partner, versus I'm being codependent, controlling, acting out of fear, shame, whatever? How can I kind of know how to navigate the difference, or what the difference is?
Which camp are you speaking from?
I'm saying, I think it's true for
in general.
I think it's true for everyone in relationships, but particularly from a betrayed partner, because this is one of the first things I hear from a lot of people who are betrayed are, what's my role in this? And I get the therapy answers of like, dude, don't pick it up. It's not your fault. It wasn't your fault. Like, we can go back to episode 40 and cover all those, have people out of the show. But so like, well, then how? So I just don't do anything. I just pack my bags, leave for a year, and see if they change and come back? Or, because you do have influence, because we have a bunch of stories on the podcast of, man, when she did this, when she did, when my partner did this, that helped me see, or whatever.
Yeah, I think my answer is simple, but not easy. And does it feel clean? Like, does it feel clear? Like,
expand for us.
It's a body experience. You're going to feel whether or not that's coming from a place of sincerity, compassion, love, consideration, or if it's cluttery and messy and wonky. Your body knows. You're going to feel it, right? Additionally, I think there's a difference between, so we have this independence. I'm going to do it all on my own. I'm going to figure it out. And then we have dependence. I can't do anything because I'm stuck. And there's this like interdependence in between that. And that's kind of what you're looking for. It's this idea of this truth and this truth both can be true. And how do we be in harmony with each other? Right. And so it's a simple answer. It's not easy, but like, when I'm in a betrayed space, there is so much work in me to do that I can hunker down and focus on that for quite some time and repair me. And like, when I talk about recovery, I talk about like, I've been in recovery. I'm still in recovery. That's a recovery of self. That's a recovery of my identity. That's a recovery of my worth. That's a recovery of me being a daughter of God. Like, I'm trying to recover all of that. And there's a lot of work there. And I know for myself, as that house got blown up and burned to smithereens, and I looked at stuff, I was like, whew, I have a lot of trauma work I need to do, actually. For me, what was tricky is I knew in my soul that the more work I did, the bigger the gap would get.
In your relationship.
In my relationship. And I knew that the more growth that I happened, the bigger that gap would get. I named it. I named it on a porch with you two, right? Mm-hmm. And knew if I step into this, I'm at risk of getting divorced. I'm at risk of losing this relationship that I've been fighting tooth and nail for. And I cannot deny that I need to walk into my work and fix my stuff and clean up my side of the street, to use those therapy words.
Well, I think that's a fear that a lot of betrayed partners can relate to. They're like, if I really get to help thee, they may not be coming.
Yeah.
And then I have to be in my knowing.
And
right?
I can speak from the space of I've experienced both. I experienced some betrayal from a close family member who did their own work, made a ton of repair, and our relationship has never been better. It's phenomenal. The closeness that we have is great. And I am currently in a space, right, of where as I did my own work, the gap got further and further and further. I can't unknow what I know. I can't unknow the needs that I have and that I deserve to have those needs be met, and that they're not big asks with a K. They're fair. They're reasonable, right? And I had to at some point believe what my partner was showing me, because my partner told me a lot of things, but I had to at some point believe what was being shown to me, and it resulted in divorce.
Yeah.
And I am still standing.
Yeah.
Some days it's a crawl. Some days it's.
So one of our audience members, this is a good segue for that. One of our audience members is just simply asking Beckie, what would you say to a betrayed person who has now left their relationship, but might be experiencing some guilt or shame around that leaving? One, I'm curious if you did experience that yourself, and if not, that's fine. But in the event that you, or if you were counseling
shame
someone.
or guilt for leaving.
Yeah.
So shame is about identity. It's about who I am. Guilt is about behavior,
I'm a
right?
bad person for giving up on my marriage. Could
That's
be what
shame,
that shame.
Yeah.
I don't know that you can avoid the guilt.
Okay.
I don't know that you can,
Yeah.
right? Because, I just experienced this today. Like, I felt some guilt in regards to some effects that things are having on my kids.
Yeah.
And when you love people, like, you're not going to be able to avoid guilt. And
Because there's a grief that's going to
yes,
happen.
and
no one could have been perfect. You were not perfect in your marriage. No one can
and
be.
never mind
Yeah.
that, like, I know I made the absolute right decision in getting divorced. God knows that I know it. Quite honestly, my kids know it. My former partner knows it. We all know, right?
Yeah.
And I feel incredibly guilty that my kids have to live like that.
Yeah.
You can't avoid the guilt. The shame is a different story.
Okay.
And
Speak
so
into that part then.
If shame is being felt, I'd speak it.
Okay.
I'd say it out loud and say, hey, I'm feeling shame. I feel like I'm a terrible mom. Or I feel like da-da-da-da-da-da. Again, just experienced this today.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and as you're speaking that shame and giving it a voice, hopefully you're speaking it to somebody that can hold space for that. And then they're going to speak some truth into that. Like, that's not who you are.
Right.
Or that's not, but if
And then you practice your shame resilience tools.
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. But it's unavoidable. The only way we can avoid shame is if we're a psychopath or dead, right? Like, there's nothing like to avoid it. I don't plan on being a psychopath anytime soon, and I'd like to stay on the planet a little bit longer than today. So you're going to experience the guilt and the shame, but it's identifying it and recognizing the guilt's going to come. Ride that wave. Yep, you may have screwed up. Like, I can think of a million different things I could have done different that probably would have kept my marriage intact. Primarily codependency. It is my drug of choice.
Well, and I think guilt's part of the grief process, right?
Yeah.
Totally
Which
part of the
is
grief process.
what's going to happen.
So that's what I would be curious about, because underneath that guilt and underneath that shame is a heavy amount of grief. And so for me, I will swim in guilt all day long and swim in shame all day long if I don't have to dive down into that grief,
Well said.
because that stuff
Yeah.
hurts
Well said.
and is hard,
Yeah.
right? But if I can get past the guilt, I can get past the shame, and I can get down into that grief, that's where the real work can happen. And that's where you can start to feel shifts. And there's a science behind grief. That's a whole nother podcast and
Yep.
stuff like that.
As we're running out of time and go to wrap up this episode, I have not known your whole life, and so I only know anecdotally. I might add you to my list of people. Like, I don't know James and Chris, like, pre-recovery.
Oh,
Like, I'm like, no, I want to go back to that banker who was just totally a jerk to everyone. Like, I want to go back to that mortgage broker.
I
and
just want it
Chris
to be known
that
that
was
I
like,
do
One
not.
of James's daughters is
I
here.
do
One of his
not wanna
older
go back
daughters.
to
She's like,
that.
you do not want to
She's
know that guy.
so-
Stick with the one you know.
Turn it up.
Totally. But so, like, I can't go back to like massive codependency, Becky, and like go back to
You've
the.
experienced some of her.
No, but I mean, I can't. So, I have a lot of, unashamed speaking from the eye is a big deal for us, and I do, and I hope you know this. I have a lot of just respect for just the work you have done around your betrayal
Oh,
and
wow.
watching you, like, to be able to be on that porch with you and be like,
Amen.
I think I'm gonna have to do the work, and I'm like, whatever, like, I'm not gonna tell you what to do.
That's not how
And-
they were. Do you guys want to know how they
and
really
then-
were?
and
They
then-
were
no,
like,
no,
girl,
no,
we
you
will
don't- yo,
hold
you're-
your heart.
You're side passing. This is about you. We're making about you. Nice try. So, and just you really choosing to do the work. We often talk about healing's not a function of time, recovery. Just because you have 20-year addiction doesn't mean you have to take 20 years to recover. And so really watching you do the work, as we say, like really working your recovery, I would argue from when I've known you, I would definitely give you the props of someone who's doing it well
Thank you.
and did it well.
Thank you.
Of really doing the grief, really being accountable, all the stuff we're talking, creating safety, all the stuff we're talking about. And so, I can't speak from the eye. You can speak from the eye. And so professional background in this personal journey that I have a ton of respect for, how unashamed and unafraid you've been in your personal journey of your betrayal. What is the advice you would give betrayed partners who might be stuck in the process somewhere, can't start it? Like what is the $1 million thing? What's the golden nugget that they really need to know in order to do this work well?
I know what I'm supposed to say, and I know what I want to say.
You can give 2 or 3 answers. Our listeners
Yeah.
will take some extras.
Yeah.
Well, I want to say all the things, right? Like, get a therapist and walk through it, and blah, 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 blah. Like, that's what I want to say. I think I'm supposed to share a story, so I'm going to do that instead, because that's what I think I'm supposed to do.
Great.
Great. Okay. I don't know.
Permission? Great. You don't need permission from us.
Please do.
I don't know if I've shared this with you too. I know Jane's heard it because she hung out with me at Glory, which, by the way, is an amazing retreat that you should go to in Arizona. So the day that my partner moved out was top 5, one of the hardest days after getting divorced, right? And the deal we made was I could keep the house for next year. He could take everything in the house. And he did, because he had a house that he needed to furnish, right? And so I'm sitting there in my front room after not having much, right? Bawling my eyes out. And I say to my Heavenly Father, I say, God, you've got to give me a glimpse. Like, you've got to give me a glimpse into what's to come. Because, and this, I was well into my recovery at this point, right? And I'm like, I think this might take me out. Because though I'm not suicidal and I don't have suicidal thoughts, like, in this moment, I just want to die. Like, it's too hard, too painful. You're asking for too much. I did all the things and I'm bleeding out, right? I just need a glimpse. And I know how God works with me. He's not going to give it to me right then because he wants me to learn patience. And so a couple days later, I'm walking around a bookstore and I come across this piece of art that is Jesus standing in a ship, and on either side are the apostles bringing in fish like you cannot even believe, like just nets and nets and nets full of fish. And I see this piece of art and I am just like, it's taking my breath away. And I'm like, that is beautiful. I need that piece of art. And I started to get emotional because it was a really expensive piece of art. So I had to save for it or whatever. So I asked one of the workers, I say, what's that called? What's that piece of art called? And she just smiles and she's like, oh, it's called Unimaginable. And then God just spoke right to my heart and said, girl, that is what I have for you. Unimaginable. Like, you can't even fathom what I've got coming for you. Thank you for doing the thing. I have got you. I keep my promises, right? And so for anybody who's like, oh, I'm stuck, I can't, it's not working, whatever. I would just say for you, what God has in store for you on the other side, you can't even fathom. You can't even imagine. And that doesn't mean that it's going to be a divorce and a completely different partner or whatever. It could be this partner that you never even dreamed was possible of existing, right?
We've had that story in the podcast.
For sure, right? I will tell you, your grief has a shelf life. It's not going to be forever. You've got to feel through that sucker because it's the best way to do it in real time versus stalling it out and holding it off because that's going to come like a fire hose.
Mm-hmm.
And God is the keeper of his promises, all of them. Whatever promises he has made to you individually, he absolutely will follow through on. For sure. That I know in my bones.
Amen. That's how you wrap up an Unashamed and Afraid episode.
Totally.
We might have you back 4 years from now again, Becky. You never know.
Can you imagine what 4 years from now will look
that.
like? I can't even imagine. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing your heart, my friend.
Thanks for
with
inviting
all
me
of us
to.
and being here.
For sure.
And so if someone wants to find you, how do they find you?
The Accepted website, which is acceptedlife.com? Question mark?
There's not a question mark after. Just
Yeah,
.com.
no.
I'm
Question mark.
asking. Yeah.
That'll send you to the dark web.
There.
Yeah.
You can go to BeckieHennessy.com, but it's not going to be BeckieHennessy.com for long because I need to change that last name piece of it.
So we'll forward it, but
That'd
be
we'll
great.
get you there.
Yeah,
We'll get you
but
there.
acceptedlife.com will work.
Acceptedlife.com for sure. That's not changing. That
Yep.
will stay consistent.
And if I remember right, you do have a podcast.
I mean, do I?
There are episodes.
There
I
are
can go
episodes
listen
coming.
to.
There's about 70-ish episodes, and there's
it's
more
called?
episodes coming. Living Through.
Living through
And you're saying living through what? It. All of it. That's what you're living through.
all the things, as Miss
Right.
Becky would say.
Yeah.
So I invite you to follow us at Unashamed and Afraid. If you'd like to donate and help us with this movie become an outsider, we invite you to go to unashamedandafraid.com/donate. As you know, we do scholarships. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. So if you need help and access to resources like things like the Glory Retreat you mentioned here, go ahead and you're worthy of it. If you have a story of betrayal and you're healing like Becky and want to share, we'd love to hear from you. So contact at unashamedandafraid.com. And until we have the opportunity to connect again, give us 5 stars on iTunes. That's how the world rates us. So help us there to share this message of hope and continue to be unashamed.